I didn't plan for this to happen. Honestly, it began in one of the most ordinary ways you could imagine. I was traveling, bouncing between meetings, interviews, and late-night strategy sessions. My body was running on fumes, my mind scattered, and I just needed one quiet night. I booked a small hotel room in a city I barely remember because, to me, it was just another stop on an endless road. The curtains were drawn, the room was dim, and I sank into the chair by the window with a glass of water. Outside, the streets glowed with neon, cars weaving through the night, life moving forward as usual. And yet, inside me, there was this hollow silence, a gnawing question I couldn't shake. What if I'm wrong about everything that really matters? What if I die tomorrow and I'm not ready to meet God? Before we go deeper, tell me in the comments, which country and city are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? Because where you are and what you're walking through matters. You may think this story is about me, but tonight, it's about you. The room grew colder? I thought maybe the AC had kicked on, but no, this was different. The air was dense, weighty, like invisible hands pressing down on my shoulders. And then the silence broke. A light not from the lamp, not from the street, but a living light, flooded that room. My chest tightened, and my knees gave out as I fell to the floor, and in that brilliance I saw him, Jesus, not as a painting or a stained glass figure, not a distant idea, but alive, radiant, more real than the ground beneath me. His eyes, fire and tenderness all at once, pierced through every mask, every defense, every excuse. He spoke. And when he did, it wasn't like sound entering my ears, it was truth echoing inside my soul. Elon, he said, and I can still hear his voice. You are busy building things that will pass away, but I have built for you a kingdom that will never end. Do you want to be part of it? I tried to speak, but my words dissolved into tears. And that's when he began teaching me point by point, with a clarity I can't deny. He said, so many believe they are safe because they attend services, read words, or wear titles. But the door of the kingdom is narrow. It's not about convention, it's about conversion. A heart reborn, not a habit repeated. His voice carried both sorrow and strength, like thunder clothed in compassion. I felt as though he was not only speaking to me, but through me, to millions who were caught in the comfort of rituals, but had never truly been changed from the inside out. In that moment, every Sunday I had ever sat in a service without listening replayed in my memory. Every time I nodded along, stood when others stood, sang when others sang, but my heart remained untouched, unchanged. He was showing me that outward motions mean nothing if the heart is far away. I could almost feel the weight of empty traditions pressing down like heavy chains, and suddenly I understood how easy it is to mistake religion for redemption. And immediately I remembered his parable in Matthew 25 and 113, the story of the wise and foolish virgins. 5 were prepared with oil in their lamps, 5 were not. And when the bridegroom came, only those ready entered in. I could see them in my mind, lamps flickering in the night, the desperate scramble of the unprepared, the shutting of the door, the cry of Lord, Lord, open to us, still echoes like a warning. It was not enough to have lamps, the oil mattered. Preparation mattered. A heart filled with his spirit mattered. The scene unfolded before me as if I was standing among them. The wise, steady, secure, glowing with the quiet flame of readiness. The foolish, frantic, unprepared, begging for what they could not borrow in that final hour. And the door closing, not out of cruelty, but out of truth. Readiness cannot be faked when eternity is at stake. My chest tightened as I realized how often I had lived as though I had time to spare, as though tomorrow would always be promised. Jesus looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, you can build rockets, cars, cities on Mars, but unless your heart is made new in me, the door will close, and you will not enter. His words pierced deeper than any blade. They stripped away the pride of achievement, the illusion of control. All the towers I thought I had built, all the dreams I thought were eternal, were suddenly revealed as sandcastles against the tide of eternity. Those tears in his eyes told me something more than judgment. They told me love. This was not a warning from anger, but a plea from mercy. His sorrow was not because he lacked power, but because he longed for me to choose life. In that moment, I realized that my soul was his priority. Not my inventions, not my influence, not my legacy, my soul. His gaze held me there, unable to look away, unable to pretend that I didn't understand what he meant. I felt the weight of the narrow door he spoke of. I saw it standing tall, unmovable, a door framed in light. It wasn't wide enough to carry pride through. It wasn't wide enough to squeeze worldly crowns or earthly success inside. It was wide enough only for a soul stripped of all but faith, a heart surrendered. And I knew this door wasn't something I could manipulate, negotiate, or outthink. It required humility, something I had spent much of my life resisting. The contrast between convention and conversion came alive to me. Convention lets us sit comfortably, unchallenged, applauded by others but unchanged before God. Conversion sets a fire in the heart that cannot be hidden, a transformation that breaks the chains of empty religion and awakens real life. And as I knelt there, trembling, I could feel him asking me, not if I had conformed, but if I had been transformed. 1,000 excuses tried to rise in me, my business, my pursuit of discovery, my good intentions. But each one burned away under his gaze. I realized then that he was not looking for excuses, he was looking for surrender. The oil in the parable was not borrowed at the last moment, it was cultivated daily. And that's what he was showing me. No achievement, no status, no title could purchase what only daily surrender could bring. The light shifted, and I felt the weight of his holiness pressing against my own compromises. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced, like standing under a blazing sun that revealed every flaw, every crack, every hidden stain. His presence made it impossible to hide, impossible to excuse. He said, I do not want lukewarm hearts. Either be hot or cold, but do not settle for halfway. I spit out the lukewarm because it dishonors the cross. The tone of his voice was not cruel but decisive, like a surgeon removing what would kill if left untreated. In that moment my whole life flashed before me, not the public successes but the private compromises. The countless times I had spoken about truth without living it fully. The times I had brushed off conviction with business. The moments I settled for good enough when he was asking for my whole heart. His words revealed to me how subtle lukewarmness really is. It does not roar, it whispers. It does not shock, it lulls. It is comfort dressed as faith, safety disguised as obedience. Revelation 3:22 burned in my mind, the letter to Laodicea. They thought they were rich and in need of nothing, but Jesus said they were wretched, poor, blind, and naked. I suddenly saw myself in them, and it terrified me. Outwardly, they looked accomplished, strong, and self-sufficient, but inwardly they were barren. How often had I mistaken wealth for blessing, influence for approval, knowledge for wisdom. In his light, I saw that none of those things could clothe my soul or open heaven's door. He showed me what it meant to be lukewarm. It was not the rebellion of outright denial nor the passion of total surrender. It was the dangerous middle, where the soul believes it is safe while drifting toward ruin. It was like water, neither refreshing nor purifying, just stagnant, tasteless, and useless. And the thought of dishonoring the cross by living halfway made me tremble. He wasn't asking for perfection but for passion, not flawless strength but full surrender. And with power in his voice, he whispered, I stand at the door and knock. Elon, let me in, not as a guest but as Lord. If you let me, I will sit and dine with you. His words carried an invitation deeper than religion. They were not about hosting him occasionally, when convenient, but about yielding every room of my life to his presence. It struck me that I had often treated him like a visitor, welcome in certain spaces but kept away from others. His voice carried the weight of eternity, but his tone carried tenderness. The idea of him dining with me was so intimate, so personal. It wasn't the cold distance of a ruler checking a subject. It was the nearness of a friend, a father, a savior longing to share life with me. Yet the condition was clear, he would not force his way in. I had to open the door, and that door, I realized, was not just a one-time gesture but a daily decision. His words sliced through me. They exposed how many times I had kept him outside while pretending he was inside. I thought about the prayers I prayed out of habit, the moments I claimed his name while still clinging to control. I had put his name on projects, but had I put his lordship in my heart? I had spoken of him to others, but had I truly allowed him to govern every hidden thought, every secret choice? I remembered times when I said I believed but lived as if my own wisdom was enough. Times when I claimed trust but relied only on strategy, on numbers, on intellect. Lukewarmness had 1,000 disguises, and in his light, each one was torn away. The realization broke me. I could no longer deny that I had often left him knocking at the door of a house, I claimed already belonged to him. I felt the pain in his words, not anger at being rejected, but longing at being left outside. The Lord of glory, who commands galaxies and holds eternity, standing outside the door of a heart waiting to be let in. The image shattered me. It revealed how patient he is, how merciful, how unwilling to barge in uninvited. His knock is steady, his presence constant, yet he waits for the choice of surrender. And as his light burned through me, I saw clearly that halfway would never be enough. The cross was not halfway. His suffering was not halfway. His love was not halfway. And to treat it with anything less than full devotion was to miss its meaning entirely. The lukewarm life was not safe. It was dangerous. It was not neutral. It was rejection dressed in passivity. And I knew then that the only safe place was the fire of full surrender. The light shifted, and I felt the weight of his holiness pressing against my own compromises. It was not just a passing sense of guilt, but a crushing awareness that every hidden corner of my life was being searched by eyes that could not be deceived. He said, "I do not want lukewarm hearts. Either be hot or cold, but do not settle for halfway." I spit out the lukewarm because it dishonors the cross. His words came like fire, exposing every shallow excuse I had clung to, every instance where I had convinced myself that partial obedience was enough. I trembled as his holiness revealed the gap between what I professed and how I lived. He was showing me that lukewarmness is not harmless. It is dangerous, because it convinces us we are safe while we are drifting away. It is the illusion of faith without the surrender of faith. It is singing songs about devotion while living as if he were optional. And in his presence I could no longer hide behind business, intellect, or influence. All of it crumbled under the weight of his truth. Revelation 3:1-22 burned in my mind. The letter to Laodicea. They thought they were rich and in need of nothing, but Jesus said they were wretched, poor, blind, and naked. The words pierced me because I had lived that tension. Outwardly, I had more than enough resources, connections, achievements. But what use is all of that if, before the eyes of eternity, I am spiritually bankrupt? I realized then that wealth can clothe the body but never the soul. Success can feed the ego but never the spirit. Without him I was naked before God. The image of Laodicea lingered like a mirror held up to my own life. How often had I mistaken external blessing for internal approval? How often had I measured spiritual health by outward fruit, rather than inward fire? The people in that letter were blind, unable to see their true condition. And I had to admit, I too had been blind to how easily I settled, blind to how quickly I justified, blind to how dangerous complacency really was. And with power in his voice, he whispered, "I stand at the door and knock. Elon, let me in, not as a guest, but as Lord. If you let me, I will sit and dine with you." The invitation was so personal, so tender, that it broke me even more. Here was the King of Kings, not forcing his way into my life, but knocking, waiting, longing for me to open. He didn't want an occasional visit. He wanted ownership. He didn't want to be acknowledged. He wanted to reign. Those words shook me. I had welcomed him into certain parts of my life, but barred him from others. I had kept him in the living room while locking the doors to the closets, the basement, the hidden places where I didn't want him to look. And yet, he knew them already. My pretending fooled no one but myself. The thought of him waiting outside while I claimed to belong to him filled me with grief I can hardly describe. His voice didn't just confront me, it invited me. The promise to sit and dine was more than a meal. It was fellowship, intimacy, friendship. It was an offer of relationship deeper than any success could give me. Yet I knew this kind of closeness required total surrender. A guest could be entertained occasionally, but a lord had authority over the entire house. He was asking for all, not part. And in that moment, I saw how often I had wanted the benefits of his presence without the cost of his lordship. His words sliced through me. They went deeper than logic, deeper than intellect, cut into the very core of who I was. It wasn't just about what I did, it was about who I was becoming. Lukewarmness had dulled my hunger, numbed my spirit, and kept me content with surface-level faith. His truth exposed how many times I had settled for a version of him that fit my comfort, instead of letting him transform me completely. I realized how many times I had prayed prayers that sounded right but carried no surrender. How many times I had spoken his name in public, but silenced his voice in private. How often I had claimed belief while refusing his authority. And in that realization, his knock on the door of my heart grew louder. It was steady, patient, relentless, not in force, but in love. The kind of knock that refuses to leave because the one knocking refuses to give up. The weight of it overwhelmed me. I saw clearly that pretending was no longer possible. To leave him outside was to reject him. To open the door halfway was to insult him. And in that silence between his words, I could feel his heart, not cold or distant, but burning with love, yearning for to let him in fully. It was not just a warning, it was an invitation to something deeper, something eternal, something I had been missing all along. He lifted my chin so I could not look away, his gaze steady and filled with a fire that was both fierce and tender. The weight of his words pressed into me as he said, "My people are wandering, distracted, entertained, but I call you to watchfulness, to live awake, to guard your lamp, to guard your soul. Do not let the day of my return catch you unprepared." The sound of his voice felt like a bell ringing in the stillness, a summons cutting through every layer of distraction that had ever dulled my spirit. I felt the truth of it pressing on me. How often had I drifted, wandering aimlessly through endless tasks, endless goals, endless pursuits that never satisfied. My mind had been busy, my hands always full, but my spirit often asleep. He was showing me that wandering doesn't always look like rebellion. It can look like distraction, like a heart pulled in 1,000 directions, but never anchored in him. Watchfulness, he said, was not passive waiting but active living with eternity in view. As his words settled, I thought of a soldier on guard through the night. Every sound matters, every shadow examined, every movement measured. There is no room for sleep, no room for carelessness, because the cost of missing a threat could be death. That's what watchfulness meant. Not paranoia, but readiness. A vigilance born from love, not fear. He was calling me to live like that soldier, awake, alert, prepared for his coming. Images of wandering hearts filled my mind. People searching for meaning in endless entertainment, chasing careers, wealth, relationships, pleasures that fade. I could see myself in them, so easily pulled off course by the next goal, the next idea, the next shiny pursuit. And then I understood, wandering happens when the compass of the soul stops pointing to him. Without that true north, every path looks inviting but none lead home. His call to watchfulness was a call back to alignment, back to focus, back to the only direction that mattered. The atmosphere around me grew heavier, and I felt the seriousness of his warning. He was not speaking of watchfulness as a suggestion but as a command. Stay awake. His voice echoed, and I remembered his words to the disciples in Gethsemane. Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Their eyes had grown heavy, their bodies tired, and they slept while the most critical moment in history unfolded. I realized I had often done the same, sleeping spiritually through the moments he was asking me to stay awake. His presence drew me deeper into the reality of his return. The day was coming, he said, like a thief in the night. No announcement, no warning, no time to prepare at the last minute. Watchfulness meant living every day as if it could be today. It meant trimming the lamp, keeping the oil, living in a constant state of readiness. And the more he spoke, the more I felt the urgency, not in fear but in love. He wanted me to be ready because he wanted me to be with him. I began to see watchfulness not only as guarding against sin, but as guarding against drift. It was about resisting the subtle pull of apathy, the slow fade into complacency. Wandering is rarely sudden, it is often gradual. A prayer missed here, a scripture ignored there, a compromise left unchecked, until one day the heart wakes up far from where it began. His call was to notice the drift early, to fight it, to keep the flame alive before it dimmed to smoke. There was a sharpness in his words, but also deep compassion. I could feel his longing that none should be lost, that none should wander off unprepared. The urgency was not born of anger but of love, like a shepherd calling out to sheep straying toward danger. I felt that love reach into the deepest places of my own wandering, and it broke me. His watchfulness over me was not casual, it was relentless. And now he was asking me to mirror that same intensity in my watch over my own soul. The silence between his words felt heavy with meaning. My thoughts ran back over every wasted hour, every season of distraction, every moment when my eyes had been on the world instead of on him. And yet, even in the weight of conviction, there was hope. Watchfulness was not about the failures of the past, but the posture of the present. It was about waking up now, before it was too late, The opportunity to turn, to focus, to live awake was still being offered. As his eyes held mine, I could sense that eternity itself was leaning into this moment. The call to watchfulness was more than a warning. It was an invitation to intimacy. To live awake was to live close to him, to see what he sees, to hear what he hears, to walk in step with his spirit. Wandering may scatter the heart into fragments, but watchfulness gathers it back, centering it fully on him. And in that gathering, in that holy vigilance, I felt the weight of his glory pressing closer, as if to say, "This is the life I created you for." Finally, he lifted my chin so I had to meet his gaze. His face shone like the sun, and his words carried both urgency and compassion. "My people are wandering, distracted, entertained. But I call you to watchfulness, to live awake, to guard your lamp, to guard your soul. Do not let the day of my return catch you unprepared." Every sound in that room disappeared. No cars, no hum of machines. Just his voice and my beating heart. He said, "Elon, I am coming quickly. Tell them to be ready. Tell them I love them, but also tell them the truth. Without me, they are lost." And then, just as suddenly as it began, the room was silent again, the light faded, but his words remained etched into me like fire on steel.